by the heart in a new spirit of cooperation to create this new paradigm. And she's going to set the tone for that before I formally welcome you with the rest of the information. So please, let's welcome Alaya. Alaya, actually.
Aloha, everybody. Aloha. You know the word aloha, it means the breath of source. And source is, of course, the source of all energy. So here we are together, and we're going to connect with that. I want to make a little correction. I don't want to mislead. I'm not a direct descendant of kahunas. I actually met my kahuna grandfather in the 90s, and I was taken through a process to remember my lifetimes as kahuna. And as I remembered that I was to come here at this time to help every human being remember that each one of us is absolutely the most amazing technology that exists. We are absolutely the crown of creation from source. And we have an opportunity to do big work here. And that is really awesome. So the way that we do our big work is we connect. And we connect to source. And the source is within our breath, through the breath. So when in Hawaii we greet each other aloha, that is basically recognizing that you are one with source. And that is much more than just hello or goodbye. It's always keeping the awareness alive. So if you will join me, we're going to just allow ourselves to step into our own connection. It doesn't have to be difficult. It's just a small journey from the head to the heart. And I want to just add that when we connect here in this vibration, it's a feeling. It's an actual repeatable feeling that each one of you has experienced through life in those moments of great joy, great bliss, great things happening, great love making. We have this opportunity to connect there all the time. At its most subtle level, it's peace. And peace is our birthright. And we won't have peace on planet Earth until the human beings claim their birthright and use it and live from this peaceful vibration. Then we can access all our brilliant, genius information that we are already coded with. We have that in our cells. We have that in our DNA. Each and every one of us has a very specific purpose here on planet Earth. And you have an opportunity to be distracted by a lot of chaotic thoughts or by aligning this incredible intelligence with this vibration and then being the most powerful and potent transmitter and receiver of great creative genius. So are you ready? Shall we try it? Okay. I'm going to ask each one of you to let your hands be free and just let them be in your lap. Let's not have any blocking or protecting of the heart. Let's feel our open heart space. And then let's go ahead and close our eyes and just put your awareness right here below your throat, just at the high heart, this is called. And now focus all your awareness as your in-breath comes into you, but focus it there at the high heart. Many of us belly breathe because that's the correct breathing, and it's actually from the belly to the throat. So let's watch the in-breath come in, filling us up, and follow with your awareness the point where the breath stops and it turns and it becomes the out-breath. And stay with it with your awareness and follow it to the point where it stops and it turns and it becomes the in-breath. Receive the energy of breath with all your awareness focused on following. You'll hear my voice in the background guiding, but feel the energy breathing you and just be present with it for this moment. In breath coming in, stopping and turning, out breath going out. Did you know that the ebb and flow of breath connects you to your source within? And that the ebb and flow of breath expands you? As you continue to follow this ebb and flow, I'd like those of you that are feeling a feeling at this point, at this high heart, with the next 2 cycles, full cycles of in-breath coming in and out-breath going out, just focus your awareness and feel the vibrational frequency. Feel the feeling of love, of energy, or at its most subtle, calm and peace. Following another full cycle of in-breath coming in and out-breath going out. As you feel that feeling, those of you that are feeling it, just say yes. Okay, now we're going to send it, this energy from the belly to the throat. Like a radiant sun, we're going to emanate it out through every cell of your body, giving yourself a full wellness treatment, a wholeness treatment, activating this energy in your cellular memory so that you can be clearer and sharper and more focused. Continue to follow with the focus, emanating this out now into the field around you. The energy field, we call it the auric field, around your body, about 4 feet. Keeping your awareness at the heart and emanating from the heart center through your cells and into your auric field. Send this energy as cleansing energy, purifying and opening energy. Opening ourselves to receive the most aligned inspirations, the solutions for planet Earth, because we are in a time where we need each one of us to activate, to radiate, to emanate, so that we may be that receiver and that transmitter. Feel that feeling and stay with that feeling as you open your eyes. And as you're feeling this, look look around you and recognize that we are all connected. We all are from different places. We have different stories, but we are connected through Source. And together we can have the solutions to clean up the mess that's been created here on planet Earth. So thank you so much for participating. Blessings on your journey, and have an awesome conference. Aloha.
This is so wonderful. I see so many friends out here. Not only people I've interviewed, like some of our friends in the front row, but also so many longtime viewers of CMN and Gaiam TV. I'm Regina Meredith, the host of Gaiam TV, one of the hosts of Gaiam TV, and formerly co-founder of Conscious Media Network. My husband, the other co-founder, Scott Meredith, is in the front row with us today as well. And I just want to welcome you to this incredible event. First of all, before we even get going, I want to say, are all the cell phones turned off? Has everybody turned off their cell phones? We good on that? And then I also want to let you know that for some of you, I know a couple people have come up and said, this is really difficult. How do we decide which tent to go into? And it is, you can only see half of the speakers while you're here. So Jeroen wants to let you know that this will be available later on via live streaming. The live streaming is being captured on the website, the GlobalBEM website. You will be able to pick up anything that you wanted to see but missed because you were conflicted in your decisions here as to who to watch. So don't worry about it. You're not missing anything. Thank you. And in addition to that, I also wanted to let you know there is a movie that is going to be shown at the breaks called Take Back Your Power. It has to do with the smart meters, the smart grid system, and the solutions for essentially disassembling this disaster. And it's called Take Back Your Power. It will be shown at lunch and dinner breaks for the next 3 days. It'll be shown in 3 parts and then re-shown again. So for anybody that would like to take a look at that film, I don't know where it's going to be shown yet. Perhaps Jeroen knows and will clue us in a little later on. And let's see, final housekeeping. I think that's it for that. Live streaming, cell phones off. Okay, and also let's give a big round of applause to Jeroen, Stephanie, to Robert. It's Robert's 40th birthday today. What a way to spend his birthday. For bringing this to the United States. Was anybody in this room there in Europe last year? Oh, very good. Fabulous. Okay, good. Good to hear it. All right, now we know we have some very dedicated researchers among us. I'm going to, if you're here because you want to get the leading edge on what our future is going to look like, then every one of you has spent your time and money very well, as you already know, because I know a lot of you are familiar with some of the work of the people that will be presenting here. What's most amazing to me is that this event is taking place at all. As many of you know, the brave souls who have persisted in bringing new ideas and technologies to the world have faced an uphill battle, often with great resistance from existing governmental agencies and educational institutions. What I speak of is not a conspiracy. Many of you well know this. In fact, one of the godfathers of the free energy movement, Colonel Tom Bearden. How many of you know of Tom Bearden's work? I would think, yes. Tom Bearden, you may remember this quote. It made me laugh at the time. He said in a program called 0 Point, featuring himself, Brian O'Leary, and other energy inventors, that there would come a time when there would be a critical mass of people, of inventors, to the point where the government, quote, wouldn't be able to kill them all anymore. He was speaking of these great inventors of the energy movement. I think perhaps that time has come. My interest in the new energy technologies began when I was a teenager. My grandfather, Arthur Lanahan, was a brilliant inventor and held many patents. His life's passion was to get his new automobile engine to the market. As he showed us the prototype when I was just a kid, he explained that this engine could run with significantly increased fuel efficiency, and he was very excited about it. And he showed us that alongside his other invention, which became a remote control. He hardwired a little device into his television because he hated commercials, and he'd slam his heel on it every time a commercial came on to take the sound away. That was one of his inventions that became something we all hold today and know as a clicker. But his passion was this particular engine. Upon applying for the patent for this engine, the U.S. Navy showed up at his San Francisco apartment for a little look-see of the technology. They offered him the vast sum of $10,000 to take the project from him, ostensibly to develop it for market. Grandpa was naive. After waiting for years to no avail, he died frustrated, broken-hearted, after no further development came. And this is not an unusual story. I know many of you know friends of yours and people that are here today that have spent a lifetime trying to bring these technologies to market against great resistance. The good news is that today, many of the new inventors are savvy enough to know when to patent and when not to, when to keep it quiet and when to come out. This practical knowledge, along with a sharp rise in creativity, even the 100th monkey syndrome, even though some of us see that a little differently, still you know what I'm talking about, has essentially brought that critical mass where more and more of these technologies will be making it to market now. Now, over the course of the next 3 days, you'll be hearing from some of the most amazing scientists, inventors, and researchers, and I'm sure you're going to be heartened by both their brilliance and their tenacity in just sticking with it. So first of all, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ruby Carat.
Can I have one moment?
Yes.
Welcome, everybody.
Jeroen.
Let me address this public.
Where's the BM t-shirt?
It's under here. But I put this sweater on with a purpose. I didn't prepare at all a speech at this moment, but I've got one thing to say about the food, because there's a lot of confusion about that. The restaurant can only hold up to a certain amount of people. On the back of your ticket, it says in which group you are. You are rather in the speaker group and team group, or you are in group C or D. And group C first goes in, and then when we say, okay, now group D goes in, or else we can't host you and nobody can eat. So I hope that everybody will work with us. Now I'll come to the sweater, because I'm going to keep this short. Star Wars, as a little kid, is my inspiration to do this, because how I see it, we are the rebellion. Especially the group who was here, because let's not get emotional, right? the occupied group had a chant, we are the 99%. The breakthrough energy movement is the 1% of that 99%. But I think the people who are here understand that it only takes this, that we're going to be that 99%. And we need that technology to go to market. That is the thing that is lacking. Because when that happens, we're going to be 99% in a couple of years like that. And it's going to be the umbrella solution for all the problems that we are facing. So, but I know that you understand that, that's why you're here. So, have a nice time. Work with us, because it was a challenge to transform it from the university and put it in here. So it's not going to be a perfect conference like at Holland maybe, but we're working on it. So just bear with us and enjoy.
And where do they get the t-shirts?
The t-shirts, that's another little story. I took them in my bag, but my bags were so heavy that I couldn't take them. And then my mom sent them, and I wrote down one little digit different, and we think they're somewhere in Georgia. We're working on that. Maybe the second day or the third day of the conference, the t-shirts will be here. It's not going to be 200 t-shirts, but some of them.
Oh, she has a tracking number. Okay, good.
We're going to work on that. You will get your t-shirt sooner or later online, and we will have a discount for the people who were here, so it will come good.
Send it in a PDF offer.
Okay.
What was Also, the word on the street is that the food here is absolutely fantastic, so you can look forward to some really good meals. Now, for Ruby. As with many of us, Ruby was deeply disturbed by the images coming in of the oil-drenched sea life and coastline in the wake of the catastrophic BP oil spill. She immediately understood that a metamorphosis had to take place in our human values to avoid such devastation in the future. Having gained her bachelor's degree in physics from Temple University, she became an advocate for the new physics of cold fusion technology, which she saw as a viable avenue to clean energy, making oil spills a thing of the past. To help the public become aware of and create a demand for the profound potentials of cold fusion, she created a website called Cold Fusion Now. To date, she has written over 300 articles and produced videos on the science of cold fusion. In her talk today, she will speak about how humanity needs to prepare itself mentally and metaphysically to move into the paradigm of zero-point energy. Please welcome Ruby Carat. Ask her, ask her to show you where she's wired. It's cute.
Let me see it. Well, thank you so much. I'm just thrilled to be here with so many leaders in the new energy movement. And while any one of these technologies, whether it's zero-point, magnets, any one of these technologies could have a breakthrough at any time, I believe that cold fusion is one of the furthest along, and that may give us a usable technology first. The Cold Fusion Now website is a loose conglomeration of a number of individuals who use it to just post up their activism, their advocacy, and I won't go through the whole list, but I know that James Martinez is my associate, and he's going to be speaking here as well. And while I wanted to talk about the implications of this technology on our society, I'm going to fit that in a little bit, but I was asked to give an overview of the cold fusion situation, what it is and why we don't have it after 25 years. So that's what I'm going to try to, at coldfusionnow.org, we've collected our advocacy and our activism, documenting all the activities that people have done that are associated with us. We started out posting audio of James Martinez's interviews with cold fusion scientists, the first on the radio that we know of for the general public, and a blog where I started writing articles in support of cold fusion. We did educational outreach events and art actions in the streets. We collected names and signatures at this event here. If I get this right. This was a math festival because I teach math part-time. And I had the kids making marshmallow nuclei, something I got from a hot fusion website. Thank you, Lawrence Livermore. But of course, they were making light hydrogen and deuterium, and making helium. We've sent a lot of letters, mailings to the legislative bodies, the Senate, the Congress, the Office of Science and Technology, the President, our local officials. We've done numerous mailings. We do art events with, we made some stickers and t-shirts. This is Craig Baldwin, independent filmmaker in San Francisco, with one of our early stickers. And this is Miami DJ Lispam, and he has our stickers all over his gear when he gigs all over Miami, and wears our t-shirts. We also believe, as many of you here do, and I'm so glad to hear it, that art is so important to advocacy and education. Last year we had a New Energy Paradigm art show, and this was our first prize winner, from Adrian Grecu from Romania, and he did this piece of art right here. While I have actually stopped blogging at this point, our activism has gone to another level. We've done a lot of video interviews, and we're making a lot of films now. We were at the ICCF 18, the International Conference on Cold Fusion, that was held at the University of Miami this past July. Nobody was there to videotape it. Nobody. And so me and my associate Eli Elliott ended up videotaping the whole entire thing, and Eli is right now editing the 5-6 days of video that we got, and we're posting those lectures online at coldfusionnow.org. So you can hear the latest of what the scientists are up to in that situation. We're also working on a new feature documentary on the field. There hasn't been a real documentary on the field of cold fusion that shows the positive developments for a long time, since maybe fire from water. So we really need to get something that reveals the successes. And we're going to begin filming next spring for that project. One of our biggest advocacy tools has been the History of Cold Fusion calendar. And I have a couple of the 2013s available at the desk for free that you can pick up. And we've got the 2014 just debuting this weekend. And in this case, this calendar, I think Sterling Allen told me last year that there's not enough room to write all my appointments. And that's because all the days are filled with little bits of cold fusion history, facts and figures and formulas, and a lot of fun. And we've got pictures from some of the leading researchers in the field and their cells. Last year's theme was the early years. And the data in the calendar was based on Eugene Malov's timeline, published in Infinite Energy magazine on the 10th anniversary issue in 1999. And this year's theme is a 21st century education, highlighting some of the educational institutions and schools that have faculty doing cold fusion research with students. And in fact, we've got some great photos, including the student cells running at the Pirelli High School in Rome, where the high school students are doing cold fusion experiments, and it's just a really fantastic project that they're doing. I should say that the historical record here is incomplete. It's only the material that I've gathered from Eugene Malov's timeline and what I gather myself in addition to that. I am collecting all of this data in a big spreadsheet, and we hope to, at one point, do a interactive digital timeline that will have all of the people that have worked and their achievements, and we won't forget anybody, because everybody deserves to be recognized who's contributed to this field. So while the calendar is incomplete, and each year we're adding new things and, you know, shifting and swapping out, we are collecting all the data that's in these calendars and all the data that I collect in a big spreadsheet to put it all together at some point. You'll have to excuse me, I'm just getting over a head cold here. And my voice is a little messed up. So what is cold fusion? How did it start? And why would someone like myself interrupt their life to all full in advocate for it? Well, it's, some of you know, it's a form of energy that is non-polluting, and off-grid, and it is energy dense and allows human beings, well, the potential is to allow human beings a technological green future. We know that we could have a technological future for a little while, but all our systems are in crisis. If we want a technological future, we need an energy-dense power source to do it. I believe cold fusion is a contender to be first as a usable technology. It was announced in 1989, March 23rd, 1989. It was one data bit that went into a stream of a new communication system. The confluence of the TV, radio, satellite, and digital technologies that now has fully matured, encasing our planet. And this is a picture of the satellites in orbit around our planet right now. That news data point was just one small input that through this, what Bob Dobbs calls the Android meme, this confluence of analog, TV, radio, and satellite digital, into this Android meme, and it was amplified to such great output at the speed of light, and it shook the planet. What this really was, and here it's maybe difficult to see, I'm going to show another picture later, it was a simple cell, and it has two electrodes, a negatively charged cathode and a positively charged anode, submerged in a beaker or a test tube of heavy water and connected to a small battery. Scientists emerged from their basement lab after 5 years of research to announce a discovery made with this simple cell, and it entered through fax machines and satellites. The news media took over the story, and their words, their images were sliced and diced for prime time. It was a confusing time. The message was diluted through all this different media. And I love this little graphic here. This is actually from an early Westinghouse photo. And you see the tower here sending out some electromagnetic waves and through a screen, and this kid just going crazy. And I wonder, why did Westinghouse put this in their pamphlet? But when you understand the effects of the Android meme, this confluence of technology, you can see why it threatens identities. Science developed over 2,500 years in a step-by-step process, sometimes forward, sometimes back, but always incremental. at human speed, peer-reviewed, hierarchical. The digital technology that we saw emerging in 1989 went completely around that. And I agree that there is no conspiracy when we look at the suppression of these breakthrough technologies. It really is paradigms. And this particular situation with cold fusion arrived when this technology had threatened all the institutions, the educational institutions, political, and this data point being amplified into so much more. Like if you take a digital photo and you post it online, it amplifies it into an infinite number of channels. Well, cold fusion, as my good friend and media ecologist Bob Dobbs says, is the hardware equivalent to the Android meme. Cold fusion takes a little bit of battery input and then transforms that little input into a larger, significantly larger energy output. That's the hardware equivalent that will allow human beings to catch up with this digital environment. I know I just had to stop blogging because I just can't keep up anymore. And I really need this cold fusion battery to help me keep up. So what was it that got these two scientists very excited? The scientists in question, Dr. Martin Fleischmann and Dr. Stanley Pons, both working out of the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, where Dr. Stanley Pons was chairman of chemistry. Dr. Martin Fleischmann was one of the top electrochemists in the world at the time. And from these tiny little handheld cells that they're holding up here came this discovery that got them excited, and what was in one of its names called the anomalous heat effect. What is the anomalous heat effect? Well, when they hooked a battery up to these little cells and started electrolyzing the solution of water in the cell, it started to increase in heat. As it got hotter, the water would evaporate, and so they would fill the water back up, and that's what these little drops, and then it goes back up again, are. You can see here that it takes a long time. This is at about 34 days at this point. At some point, all of a sudden, the temperature just rose up 15 degrees. And then, at that point, it started rising exponentially. Then, all of a sudden, without warning, the temperature drops almost back down to the slope of the line where it previously was, and just keeps rising steadily again. What caused this temperature rise? What caused this temperature drop? That is the question of cold fusion. It still today is unknown. There are a number of theories, but no one generally accepted theory, and thus the name, the anomalous heat effect. However, when you have heat generated, and this was the kind of heat that was well beyond any chemical reaction, and the scientists speculated, well, it had to be nuclear. These people computed all of the chemical inputs, and the rise in temperatures that they saw in multiple data runs. This is just one of their early data graphs that I just chose to use. It's clear that this heat is much greater than anything that a chemical reaction can provide. When we have that kind of heat, we can make hot water, we can make clean water, we can make steam to turn a turbine. This is a technology that can provide us energy once we understand what this is causing, this particular anomalous heat effect. After their announcement on March 23rd, 1989, and the news, this data bit, spread throughout the globe, scientists got very excited. They knew what these claims meant. This kind of heat coming from a small desktop cell should not be occurring. It only should occur deep inside the sun, or so they thought. Scientists around the world stopped what they were doing and became electrochemists overnight. Many of the labs you see here, Texas A&M, Los Alamos National Laboratory, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, labs, these are the labs in the US. All of these labs found various positive results. Some of the positive results were tritium, which is a hydrogen isotope that only can be made by a nuclear reaction. However, the tritium was not in ratio to the neutrons. They found neutrons as well. The neutrons were of a different kind than would be expected from the conventional theory of nuclear reactions. And so this was a problem, and however, they are measuring neutrons, indicating a nuclear reaction. The confirmation of nuclear-sized excess heat, and also the transmutations, where one element is transformed into another element, something that should be impossible in these little desktop cells. I won't go into all of these. It was, we've got the Italian universities of Siena and Bologna. Italy was really on top of this and doing a lot of great work, and they still are today. Japan did a lot of work, and we see a number of universities in the US, SRI International, and this is the Bhabha Atomic Research Center in India, all got positive results from their initial experiments in trying to reproduce what Drs. Fleischmann and Pons were claiming. This is a picture from the calendar, this year's calendar, of Dr. Bruce Liebert and Dr. Borjan Lial from the University of Hawaii, who early on had one of the highest returns of excess heat that anyone had ever seen from a variation of the Fleischmann-Pons cell using molten salts. This is a close-up of an early cell by Akito Takahashi and his team at Osaka University. He was looking for neutrons in his experiment, and he did find them. And I just love the picture of this cell. It's awesome. I want one. The excitement was so great, and I remember in 1989 I was in the physics department. I spent many years as a musician, and I wasn't particularly gifted at physics, but I did okay. And we heard about it, and we're like, what? Huh? What is that? It was later on, not just a month or so later, that we heard that, oh, it was a mistake. But the excitement was huge back in 1989. Then President Bush, the US President Bush, called in Nobel laureate Glenn Seaborg, who is associated with nuclear technology involving bombs. He called in Dr. Seaborg to get a briefing. Dr. Seaborg said in a later interview that he had to respond to the cold fusion question as a physicist and everything that he knew about nuclear theory, that it had to be a mistake, that he could not support this, these claims because it flew in the face of everything that he knew about nuclear theory. He is quoted as saying to President Bush that you can't just go out and say this is not valid. You're going to have to create a high-level panel that will study it for 6 months, and they'll tell you it's not valid. And that's what he did. We got a panel together that charged with producing a report to investigate the claims. And in this panel, we had John Huizinga here. He actually wrote the report. And in the report was included some of the positive, some of the labs that got positive effects. You can see University of Utah, Texas A&M, Stanford University, no slouch there. Texas A&M, a separate group, and Minnesota. They also got a listing of some of the groups that were not able to reproduce the effect. And you can see here MIT and Caltech among them. We also have a Naval Research Lab listed as not reproducing the effect, and Sandia National Labs. Well, in fact, only about 15% of the people who attempted to reproduce cold fusion were able to reproduce it. The majority of attempts failed. They did not see the effect. Unfortunately, they weren't the right people. The right people would be MIT and Caltech, the premier science institutions in the US, the elite groups that were unable to reproduce the effect. Here at Caltech, we had Steve Koonin, who at a conference said that we are suffering under the delusion of Fleischmann and Pons, doctors Fleischmann and Pons, essentially that they're delusional. Steve Koonin later became a BP oil executive and the undersecretary of the Department of Energy. He just left a year or so, 2 ago. The MIT, the Ronald Parker, who was head of the plasma fusion lab there, basically investigating hot fusion, a different form of fusion. He actually, I don't have the picture there, somehow that got missing. He leaked a story to the local Boston newspaper, Boston Herald, saying some not very nice things about doctors Fleischmann and Pons, using the words fraudulent, schlock science. When the reporter published the story, Dr. Parker denied saying those things. Luckily, the reporter had an audio recording, and it was later confirmed that, yes, he did say those things. At the APS meeting, May 1st, 1989, the American Physical Society meeting, a mere 6 weeks after the announcement of cold fusion, had a vote by hands saying cold fusion was dead. So scientists were not looking at the data, but choosing to just follow their emotional response, and we were getting very negative responses from the American Physical Society. Bob Park actively went against if the federal government wanted to have any events that had cold fusion as a theme or had a cold fusion component. Robert Park, the spokesman for the American Physical Society, worked hard to shut them down, and I think that there's some people in the audience or at the conference here that can attest to that. So we have the premier science institutions, the American Physical Society, Nature magazine, all saying that cold fusion is dead. Thus the report said, well, it seems like it's interesting. We might recommend some funding, but they didn't think it was that important. It was a negative report, and the DOE report essentially stopped all federal funding. The Patent Office, which would follow the recommendations of the Department of Energy, then rerouted all patent applications out of the channel if they had the words cold fusion on them. And this is a memo. I printed it off LENR.org from it's in June of 1989, just a few months later. The Patent Office is saying, if you've got cold fusion on that patent, you better reroute it this way. You know, we want it to go this way. And some scientists will say, well, that rerouting basically ended up into the trash. This had the effect of stopping private investment. Without a patent, without intellectual property, those who are spending a lot of resources cannot really bring this out. And they cannot get the funding because the intellectual property is up in question. So in the US, the federal funding and the private investment essentially ended. Well, it turns out later analysis of both the MIT and Caltech data show that their designs were flawed. And there's a fabulous report that you can read written by Eugene Malov, in particular about the MIT data, showing the last data presented was shifted down. And so the MIT and Caltech experiments, which were the basis for the DOE 1989 report, and these experiments which showed negative results, may not have been negative. One of the reasons why the reproduction of the experiment failed, and there's a lot of components that go into a successful cold fusion experiment. This is just one particular situation for one particular type of system, and in this case it's the palladium-deuterium systems. In this particular graph, which I took from Michael McCubre's presentation, What Happened to Cold Fusion, I just love this graph, and I actually annotated it myself. He didn't have these annotations. Show that MIT and Caltech could not have achieved a positive result. It turns out in the types of systems that they were experimenting with, you need what's called a high loading ratio. You have to have the palladium stuffed with deuterium to greater than 85%. Here we have loading of the hydrogen isotope deuterium into the cathode, the palladium cathode, up to 90%, up to 94%. And this is where you would see the excess heat. MIT, Caltech did not get to those levels of loading, so therefore it would be impossible for them to see a result. The theory that these scientists were wedded to and could not break away from was the theory of nuclear reactions developed 100 years ago, and which initially really describes hot fusion, the kind of fusion that we have in the sun. And this type of reaction makes deadly neutrons, high energy neutrons, trillions of them, almost 1-to-1 for your reaction. Cold fusion had no neutrons of this magnitude. Any radiation from cold fusion or nuclear products is so difficult to measure. Scientists have a hard time finding it. So it does make some nuclear products, but they are so few that this is why the scientists said, well, then it's impossible that a nuclear reaction could be happening. And there's many other reasons why this was unaccepted. And it turns out that the Naval Research Lab, Dr. Miles at the Naval Research Lab, actually did get positive results. He was listed in the DOE negative column. But it took him a while. It took him several months. In fact, it wasn't till September that he got results. After working from March to September, he finally got results. He called up the DOE and said, hey, it happened, I got it. They said, oh, sorry, too late. We're already putting it in the report. And they published the report in November. A second report was not much different than the first report. 2004 had scientists in the panel more sympathetic, but no funding has been forthcoming since that report. However, the Department of Defense has recommended that this science be looked at. They believe that they want to see this happen. Here's a 2007 report and a 2009 report, both wanting this to be looked at. NASA's the one that's been going ahead with this from their first experiment in 1989 through the decades. Right now, in particular, the NASA Langley is really behind this. All of the agencies that I've talked about, the Navy, starting with Melvin Miles, has done 25 years of research. All of those agencies, the support is uneven. And you have certain levels of management that are not supportive, scientists that are actually doing the work that are supportive. So while NASA Langley is supportive of this, not all of NASA is. They're working with the Air Force Research Laboratory, Boeing Research Technology. Both have LENR in their plans for future green technology. And I'm just going to go quickly here. Commercial efforts, which my friend Dave Niebauer is going to talk about next, are stalled. We have two different types of systems, the palladium deuterium systems that can go for a long time, but don't have the power output. They have a very small power output. And we also have demonstrations of nickel hydrogen, light hydrogen systems that have high power output, and, but have only been demonstrated for shorter periods. So all of these labs that are racing for a commercial product each have a different model that they're following. And we really need to find a theory to make this happen. The problem is there is no theory. And that's why we call it the Rumpelstiltskin reaction. It's guess my name. It's had multiple names through the years, and it's also called low energy nuclear reactions. LENR is a popular one today. I won't go through the types of systems. There is growing political support. This was the European Parliament that met in June, calling cold fusion scientists to present findings, and they're mulling about what they should do about it. We have Italian parliamentarians lobbying the Italian parliament for it. And recently Bob Dole mentioned cold fusion as a solution in his Google talk. See, the funding is uneven, but we have the University of Miami opening up a new nuclear research center, the Sidney Kimmel Institute of Nuclear Research. And do we have a Skype connection to do? Let's see. We're trying to get a Skype connection here. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Oops.
Hi.
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 Okay, I think we've got you on here. Yes. I wanted to talk about the groups that were doing research, and we talked about the University of Missouri, where they have the new Skinner Institute there, and that's probably the premier public face of cold fusion in the U.S. today in Columbia, Missouri. The other really exciting thing happening is the global participation of disparate groups now using the internet to communicate together and collaborate on research. And I want to introduce to you Bob Greenier, who is the co-founder of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. Martin Fleischmann, who passed away last year, now has his legacy moving on with a group that has labs currently in France and in the US, and you're in India right now. And this is Bob Greenier, co-founder of this project. So I would like, Bob, can you tell us a little bit about what the Martin Fleischmann Project is, and what is it you're doing?
Well, first I'll start by saying that thank you very much for having me with you, and I pass on my commiserations for the suffering of the people of Boulder in the recent floods there. Sometimes these things are quoted as 100-year events, but I think we've had 300-year flooding events in the last 10 years in the UK. So something's going on with the ecosystem we live in, and I think anyone who's thinking about breakthrough energy is really doing the future generations a service, in my opinion. So, okay, so on to the subject in hand. What is the MFMP? Well, basically, we were set up on an inspiration at the ICCF 17, basically to try and address the fact that there isn't really something that's replicatable that people can buy off the shelf or get access to that will demonstrate this effect. And it's a question that's asked all the time. You know, you say this is happening, well, can I see it working, can I test it? So essentially, we were set up to demonstrate that there's a new primary energy source. A lot of people refer to it by many different names. We like to use the term new fire because it's accessible to the public at large, whilst we can get excited about things on the quantum level and condensed matter nuclear science and so forth. The general public needs something they can easily latch onto, and essentially what this technology is aiming to do is to do the job of the old fire, and why not call it the new fire. So the second, after we hopefully got to a point where we can demonstrate incontrovertibly that this exists, then we would like to promote it and provide education and get to a point where we could support people working in the industry in some way or other. So essentially those three goals have been on our website since basically day one. Even before we knew how we would do it, we decided to operate in a very non-destructible way, which was to have people that weren't necessarily bound in the normal ways into their science careers or so forth, so that they didn't have a risk of losing their jobs or whatever, or being rubbished or for fear of their income or whatever. Also that it would be distributed in multiple countries, and that it would be live and the data sets would be live on the internet, such that, you know, we're not cherry picking data, we're just showing, you know, as it comes out of the systems. So we envisaged this whole process, and we just needed something to test, and a very courageous researcher in the field, which you're probably aware of or not, depending on where you're coming from, called Francesco Celani, who was demonstrating at ICCF 17, gave us an opportunity when we asked him to test his wires. And so we went about forming a structure that would respect his intellectual property and his investors, but would be able to be open with what we're doing. So essentially we publish the plans of our reactors, the protocols of our experiments, and at every single stage, right through the data, live data delivery, we're asking anyone who's anyone to step in and say, you know, what's right, what's wrong, are we seeing something we think we're seeing, you know, what are the conventional explanations for this, is there any reality here?
This is live open science. It's open source, and you can see it on quantumheat.org.
Yes, that's right, Ruby. So you were talking about the University of Missouri. I've just spent the last 2 days at Amrita University here in Kerala. They have 3 university campuses in southern India, and they're the 6th biggest research university in India. And we're hoping that they will be another outpost of the MFMP sooner rather than later. What I learned from going to the University of Missouri for ICCF 18 was the way that a relatively small donation, but very significant in this field, has been able to leverage large resources that are just unimaginable for most researchers in this field. The type of you know, measurement equipment, this type of material science production tools. All these things are just unavailable to many of the researchers that toil away and spend their own money, frankly, over the last quarter of a century. And so if that kind of model can be promoted, then you know, the research in this field could really accelerate. So that's kind of what we're trying to achieve. People say, well, why aren't you trying to create huge amounts of heat and this, that, and the other? There are kind of like risks with trying to create things that produce immense amounts of energy, and you don't know what else might be coming out of there. It is science at the cutting edge. Nanoscale science and micrometric scale science, elements and compounds do not act in the same way that bulk materials do. So we're finding all kinds of things that these materials can do. And John Pendry, who was a contemporary of Martin Fleischmann at London Imperial College, he's kind of one of the forefathers, as it were, of this field in metamaterials, and you might have heard about the invisibility cloak and so forth. You know, these things we just never imagined that the same atoms that can do everyday mundane things can be made to play in very weird ways when they get into certain structures. So if we can create a reactor that produces reliably 5 to 15 watts per gram of active material, and it can do that, and all the questions are answered, and we can get those into universities we call it jumping the hurdle, to get them over that mental barrier that this does not exist. If you get them to over that hurdle, then they go, this is something we can invest into. We should be investing into it. And the excitement I got from the Dean of the University and the Head of Materials Science at Amrita University here yesterday was palpable. So, you know, there is a need for researching in this. MFMP, it's impervious to the normal failure modes, as I was saying earlier, other than funding. We still need funding.
Well, I want you to talk about how is the MFMP funded?
Well, essentially, it's from donations and the generosity of Paul Hunt, who is an electrical engineer, and he designed a little thing which he sold for a lot of money, and he's been very generous to provide resources. Myself and some of the other external teams have essentially either put our own money in or vast quantities of our own time. We believe this is worthwhile, and whilst we did expect that we could have achieved our primary goal within a few months, we do realise that we were kidding ourselves, and what we have demonstrated, there's a number of things we've demonstrated. I know you want to talk about that, Ruby. A number of the things that we've demonstrated is that, yes, things that Francesco Celani was claiming, we've been able to replicate them. We've also been able to replicate some of the questions, and we're dealing with the questions one by one. We are getting closer to an incontrovertible experiment, and right now the biggest outstanding question is that of Langmuir effect, where the wire apparently catalytically dissociates H2 into monatomic hydrogen. Everyone knows that. I don't know how technical are the people in the room. Are they interested in how this might work?
Well, we just have about 3 minutes left.
Okay, so I'll shut this down then quickly. So do you have a specific question you want to ask me?
Well, I just want you to talk about how important has it been to have the public involved in this open source science project where people can comment, and you've gotten funds from the public as well. How important is that?
Essentially, the public have been critical. We've received about $18,000 in funds over the year, and we're hoping that another anonymous donor is going to give us a little bit of money to help rerun the steel and glass cells. So that's one way people can help is donations. There is a huge social multiplier. Every dollar that goes into the MFMP gains the time of the volunteers, but also the time of the crowd. And we are constantly reevaluating what we should be doing and what we are doing, and by crowd contributions, they are analysing the data, they're making suggestions. They're running away and looking at paper after paper. They might read to pull out one paragraph that's critical to what's going on. And the beauty of live open science is that anyone, regardless of their career, can take part. They can do it in their free time. And the contributions that they make, which may be the critical fork in the road to, discovering the what, way, why, and how of doing this, that is recorded in the record. So we can look back and say, at this point, this volunteer in the public somewhere said this, and this was the critical moment that made it all happen. So everyone gets their due credit for what they do, and we can work with people that want to be fully open and those that want to protect maybe their production methods for their key component. So we've got some really exciting things. I just have to say, you've got to watch the website in the coming days. We've had an experiment running in France. It's a differential experiment. It's been showing that it took 6 days to load the active wire. It's been showing apparent excess heat now for more than 20 days. We're going to be doing some interesting things like keeping the power on the active cell and increasing the power on the passive cell in order to try and establish how much more the effective output is from the active cell than the passive cell. And then another thing that's coming up, we may be able to shortcut this process. A bug in that experiment has caused a leak of hydrogen, which we have to keep replenishing. We're seeing something that could point to definite nuclear activity. And so we've been donated a sodium iodide gamma detector tube from Jean-Paul Bavarian, and we're looking to secure a gamma spectrometer from Australia, such that, yeah, I mean, if we show this, it's open and shut case we can start distributing the replication. So it's very exciting. Of course, yeah, I know it's very exciting, but it might not happen. So just tune into the website, see what we're up to. There's a great experiment going on in the US where they're testing this LENR question. You know, some people have criticised that the excess heat might be coming from that, although we fail to see how all of the excess heat can be coming from its potential. But you know, if the monatomic hydrogen can only travel 70 nanometers, how is it getting to the glass when we've got pressure of 1 bar or plus in there? You know. But we need to be absolutely thorough. If we're going to answer all these questions robustly, we must do proper science.
Can you tell us the name of that website where we can watch this happening?
It's called quantumheat.org.
Okay, with that, Bob, thanks for joining us. Bob Grenier from the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. And I guess that's what I will close with as well. If we get that last slide there. I'll just say that very important to keep up the advocacy and get to the young people, because they don't have those prejudices that really smart scientists have. This is a skater from the Venice Beach Skate Park, happy to slap a sticker on her board every time she flies through the air. Somebody sees that message, and that's what we want. Thanks. Thank you.
One short announcement, and this is important. There's always a parking announcement at a conference, and this is mine. Everybody who parked next door here on that parking lot needs to get their cars out right away. They're gonna start pulling cars out in an hour. The neighbor is upset. It's his parking lot. It was a mistake by us. We thought it was free parking. So everybody parked behind this tent needs to pull out his car. There's a big parking lot here, 5 minutes walk only, Table Mesa, or you can park around in this area as long as it's not a business parking. So everybody who's parked up there, get your car out if you don't want to get fined. Okay? Thank you.
Oh, that was Grenier. He's co-founder of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project.
If you'd like to take a 5-minute break to go to the restroom and also take care of these parking situations, we'll come back literally. Let's try to make it 5 minutes from now. Okay.
Gaan we even onze auto ergens anders zetten.
Tämä oli sitten tää LENR, joo. Mulle se on vielä tämmöinen.
The internet is kind of neutralizing the purpose of it. It used to be but now you can teach yourself the volume more. And of a perspective that is much more useful to you. They were very arrogant. You're saying they don't have theories. How is that? What? That's great. But you know, it's going to be yeah, because I'm going to
Yeah, that's where I can get this.
Yeah, he's very good. He understands a lot of the work and stuff. He knows how to talk because
You know, finding what works. I don't see very but I do.
people.
Shouldn't be an issue. Shouldn't be an issue, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Welcome back, and I want to thank Ruby for that. That was an incredible historical perspective on why this stuff hasn't happened yet. You were fabulous. Thank you, Ruby. Also, you know, what really gets to me is to think that BP, Exxon, and these oil companies spend multiples of tens of millions of dollars just in their legal fees and fines alone. Any one of those fines could have funded some of this exotic technology. Is really disturbing. I mean, don't you think? So, getting down to the practical ends of that, the experimentation in the field of cold fusion, or low energy nuclear reactions, as we're going to call it here, otherwise known as LENR, has been challenging to reproduce. David Niebauer believes that cold fusion is inevitable. He tells us that a race has begun to develop the working prototypes, which some insiders are saying could be to market as early as 2 or 3 years from now. The 3 companies in the race are Leonardo Corporation, dealing with Andrea Rossi's ECAT device, Berluin Energy Group, and also Defcalion Green Technologies, originally out of Greece. David is going to update us on the most recent news and developments of all 3 companies and their strategies to get that technology to market, which naturally addresses the critical barriers of both R&D investment funds and the sometimes inhibiting practices, as you just saw in Ruby's presentation, of the U.S. Patent and Trademark offices. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Regina. Okay. Let's get my first slide up and we can get started. Is Mitch back there? Okay, there we go. Good. So, what if I were to tell you that there's a new technology that's been validated by reputable third parties, that's cheap, relatively inexhaustible, and can satisfy all of our energy needs without nuclear or carbon waste?
Where is it?
And what if I were to tell you that with this technology, we'll be able to desalinate water, irrigate our deserts, and end hunger on the planet, and also stop the obscene water wars that have started to take place, and provide clean, potable water to people around the planet who really just don't have it right now? And what if I were to tell you that with this technology, we can end the strife in the Middle East, that the war over scarce resources can be a nightmare from which we finally awake. Well, I'm here to tell you today that this technology is real, and we are on the cusp of commercializing it. What do we call it? What are we talking about? Cold fusion, which is a really unfortunate name for some reasons that I'll talk about a little bit later on. LENR, low energy nuclear reaction. I'm sorry, this is a name that only an engineer could love. And my apologies to the engineers. LENR, I really don't like at all. The new fire, you heard the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project people calling it the new fire. And Andrea Rossi also calls it the new fire. And I kind of like that. So I'm going to talk today, when I'm talking about this, I'll talk about low energy nuclear reaction, or LENR, or I'll talk about the new fire. So my name is David Niebauer. I'm an attorney by profession, a lawyer. I focus all of my energies in alternative energy projects, and I work primarily with promoting intellectual property strategy and protection. And I work with commercializing clean energy companies. I work with some of the top companies right now that are commercializing clean energy technologies. So I'm really, really passionate about this field. But I take a dispassionate approach, okay? I make money on companies that are commercializing products. That not just good ideas, not things that we hope we can have, but actual real products. And I'm here to tell you that LENR, the new fire, is the most interesting, most exciting technology that I've seen in my career. Now I have to confess to you here that one of my energy clients said to me, don't go and talk at this conference. Okay, this is a fringe conference. It's going to be bad for your reputation, your credibility. Don't do it. Okay, but I'm here, and I don't think you're on the fringe. I don't think this is the fringe. I think this is the new frontier. The new frontier, and I know that we create reality with language, with our language. And nothing is possible until we're able to imagine it, until we talk about it, until we make it real in our language and how we speak and how we do things. So I believe in the work that we're doing here, and I know that we're on the frontier, we're moving forward, and there are going to be people joining us very quickly, and they'll say, those are the ones who took a stand, who had the courage to go out and say, yes, this can really happen. This is real. So in our short time here together, I want to talk about three things. Why I think LENR, the cold fire, is the most exciting technology out there. And I know that we're going to hear about other things during the conference. I'm really looking forward to people informing me about other things that are viable, that could compete with this new technology. I want to talk about why I believe conventional alternative energy sources are just not going to be able to do it. That we can't solve our problems with conventional alternative energy, in my opinion. And I'm going to talk about why LENR is our best hope. Why not just technologically, but also from a commercial point of view. So let's get started. I first heard about cold fusion in 1989 when Pons and Fleischmann did their experiment, and I was very excited about it. I was a young lawyer. I remember sitting in my office in New York going, damn, this is really, really interesting. But it got debunked. Soon after, MIT, Caltech, they said, this is not real, this was in your imagination, you're deluded, and I pretty much just ignored it and went about my business, started working with other alternative energy companies. I've worked with all different types of companies. I've worked with solar development, I've worked in fuel cells, I've worked with battery technology, I'm doing a lot of work right now in the power grid, trying to upgrade the power grid so that we can get more solar and more wind onto the system. So, you know, as I said, I'm passionate about this. I keep working at it. And I kind of focus my attention on that, what I considered, you know, real. These are real technologies, real things that we can actually bring into the market and make real. So that's, you know, I'm kind of going about my business doing that and really enjoying it, working with great people, people who are inspired, who are really truly trying to change the world and how we use energy. And then one day I was going out for a run, as I often do. I live in San Francisco, so I was running in Golden Gate Park. I had my headset on and listening to a podcast. It was a podcast by the renewable energy world. And in the podcast, they were interviewing Dennis Bushnell, who Ruby talked about. Dennis Bushnell is the chief research scientist at NASA's Langley Research Center. So he's no slouch. This is a man with a high reputation. He knows what he's talking about. And he talked about it, and he said, something really interesting just happened. An Italian inventor has demonstrated a cold fusion device, and he's getting a significant amount of heat out of this device in kind of at levels that we haven't seen before. And he talked about the history, and he said, yeah, it was debunked early on, but actually scientists have been working on it underground since that time. And there actually have been hundreds of experiments that show anomalous heat. Anomalous heat, meaning heat coming out of an experiment and out of a reaction that can't be explained with conventional science. So he said something is happening. We've known that something's been happening, but we don't have a theory to explain why it's happening. The amounts of energy that we're getting are really minuscule. We're talking, you know, milliwatts. It's hardly enough to be useful, and the reactions are notoriously difficult to replicate. And so he said, you know, until now, it's really not been that interesting. But something happened, and he got excited about it, and he got me excited about it. And this is what he said, and I want to read this because this is what I'm kind of just running along, you know, kind of minding my business. You know, that's kind of neat. And he says, I think we're almost over the we don't understand it problem. I think we're almost over the this does not produce anything useful problem. I think this will go forward fairly rapidly now. If it does, this is capable of, by itself, completely changing geoeconomics, geopolitics, and solving climate issues. Whoa, that's what I said. Wow. And I stopped and I listened to it like 3 times in a row. It's like, what did he just say? Did he just say what I think he just said? Dennis Bushnell, the chief scientist at NASA Langley. And that kind of really started things going for me. I went home, probably my wife Kate, I'm sure she's in the audience here, she probably remembers I went home, I was all kind of really excited. I went onto the internet, I Googled, I'm like, damn, this actually has continued. There has actually been continuing research in this. This is really, really interesting. I looked up Andrea Rossi, you know, who is this Rossi guy? Excuse me. I lose my voice a little bit here. Who's this Rossi guy? And I actually went on his site and I sent him an email. And I said, Dr. Rossi, congratulations. It's very exciting work that you're doing. I'm amazed. I said, so great that you're demonstrating your device. I want to get one of your devices out in California. Come out and put up a device. Let's go and put it up at the Google campus. Let's go and put a demonstration up at an Apple server farm. Let's get Elon Musk to put it up and run one of his electric cars, or even the SpaceX work that he's doing. And that must have hit a chord with Rossi. Rossi emailed me back fairly quickly, almost immediately. And he said, yes, I'd like to come out to see you. He got on a plane. He flew out to San Francisco. Kate and I took him out to dinner. He's a very gracious man, serious, intentional, you know, very credible. I mean, he has a mission. He is working on, he has a mission. He's working on a mission. I met with him the next morning. We talked about his technology. We talked about the possibilities of what's possible. We talked about where he was in terms of his financing and what he was doing. He then introduced me to his U.S. exclusive licensee, a group called AMP Energo that are based in New Hampshire. Some of the stakeholders of AMP Energo are former officials of the Department of Energy. They've been working with Rossi for quite a long time. Rossi has something, okay? I don't have necessarily a lot of inside information. I have some inside information. I do know that what he's doing is real, and he's moving forward. And I'll talk a little bit about it after that. So I got really excited. You can kind of tell I'm sort of an excitable kind of guy. I get passionate about things, and I started looking at it. I started blogging. I started trying to gather information. I told my friends all about it. And then a good friend of mine, Ed Beardsworth, who is a physicist who used to work with EPRI, which is a utility-sponsored research lab who follows new energy technology. He said, David, you know, you're blogging about this guy Rossi, who you just met and you barely even know. Don't you know that there's a guy in your backyard right across the bay in Berkeley, California, whose name is Robert Godis, who has gotten significant energy out of his device? Why don't you go meet with Robert? So he introduced me to Robert Godis. I became really good friends with Robert. Robert has a theory on what he thinks is going on in the reaction, and he uses this theory to guide his experiments. Now, we talked about this a little bit, and I think I'll touch on it a little bit later, but I'll just say again, the balance between the theorists and the experimentalists is really, really crucial. And without a theory, you're really kind of shooting in the dark. It's trial and error. You're trying things. Will this work, that work? But without knowing the groundwork of why it's happening, you really have a hard time, even in your experiments, to know what you should be looking for. I mean, I kind of think of all the hoopla over the great search for the Higgs boson. Okay, the Higgs boson is this theoretical particle that came directly out of a pure theory, mathematical theory. If the experimentalists who were doing the work at the Large Hadron Accelerator didn't have a theory to look for the Higgs boson, they wouldn't have found it in a million years. Impossible. Wouldn't have found it. So we're all hoping and moving forward toward some kind of theory. And I'll talk a little bit later about Robert Godis' theory, at least kind of a basic understanding of what it is. But the fact that he has a theory and he's using it as a guide to his experiments, I think, is really, really important. I actually began representing Berlin Energy Corporation. So full disclosure, I'm their general counsel. I've helped them raise over $3 million from far-sighted angel investors who have come to the lab, looked at what they're doing, talked to Robert about his theory, looked at his devices, looked at his research, and said, you know what, we're gonna fund you and help you get going. With this money, we were able to enter into a research and development agreement with the SRI International, Stanford Research Institute, and they are now working. They have 15 engineers working with SRI, working to improve the reaction. They have two separate devices that they're working on. One is called the wet boiler, which operates at relatively lower temperatures, and they're also working on something called the hot tube, which is designed to get to temperatures of 600 degrees Celsius, which is hot enough to boil water, run a turbine, create steam, run a turbine, create electricity. So very, very exciting things that are going on with Berlin. And I want to just say a little bit more about SRI International, who they're working with. Excuse me. As I said, they're one of the premier research and development groups in the world. They've developed some of the technologies that we use day to day. The computer mouse was developed at SRI International. They also developed the Siri artificial intelligent voice that's in the new iPhones. So they are really at the cutting edge of research and development. They also have on their staff, and have since early on, Michael McCoubre, who is one of the premier cold fusion scientists. He was a postdoc with Martin Fleischmann. He probably, he's one of a handful of scientists that know cold fusion, that understand the reaction, that knows how to work the reaction. So he is now working in collaboration with Robert Godes to develop a prototype, a commercial prototype of a working device. They don't have one yet, but if you're going to stack the cards and you're going to create something real, it's not a bad team to be working with. So let's see what else that I wanted to say about that. An interesting approach, say go-to-market strategy that Berluen has, is to retrofit stranded generation assets. For example, coal plants that have been shut down by the EPA. And the idea is to go in with the hot tube and replace the boiler, the coal burning boiler that's in there, and generate electricity with the hot tube. The plant's already set up with the grid, so the energy would go directly into the grid almost without anyone noticing it. There's already a power purchase agreement in place with the utility. It could happen that way without a whole lot of fanfare, and all of a sudden our energy is being generated with this new energy technology, which would be very, very exciting. Let's see what my other slide here is. Oh yeah, this is good. So I want to talk a little bit about the basis of what's going on in this low energy nuclear reaction. Now, this is going to be very simplistic, and Ruby, please jump in when I make a mistake. As I said, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a physicist. I'm going to try to explain it in ways that I can understand it, so that at least we have a kind of a general sense of what we think is going on. And like I said before, we don't have a theory, so it makes it really difficult to explain what's happening. But the first thing I'd say is that what LENR, it's not hot fusion. There's not the whatever, either deuterium going on, hot fusion, which is up here, or other kind of things that they're doing at some of the ITAR experimental lab that they're doing in Switzerland right now and spending billions and billions of dollars doing it. But what this slide shows is that here are the chemical reactions, burning things, okay? And here on this side is the energy density. Now this slide was given to me by my friend Matt Trebethick, who is a venture capitalist at the Venrock venture capital firm, and he told me that I could use it as long as I let people know that it comes from him. He did this work. But I got really, really inspired by this because, as Matt says, we have down here the chemical reactions, burning gas, gasoline, burning things, and then we have orders of magnitude higher, we get to the nuclear reactions. And as Matt said, either nature is incredibly perverse and doesn't allow any kind of energy generation in this range, or we simply haven't figured it out yet. We either need better chemistry or better physics to understand how to access the energy levels in these ranges. And I think, when scientists discovered the nuclear reaction, 100 years ago or whatever, not even that long ago, they got really, really excited because here we can show a huge amount of energy release by splitting an atom or by fusion. We can create a bomb that everyone can see. It's extraordinary. This is this extraordinary energy coming out. An LENR device, and Ruby showed it, it's in this little, it's in a little test tube. The energy coming out is very subtle in a way. It's smaller. It's it has to be coaxed out a little bit. So, and in fact, most researchers believe that rather than the the strong nuclear force. There are these fundamental forces of nature. Two of the most important, one is the strong nuclear force and one is the weak nuclear force. A lot of attention has gone into the strong force. The strong force is what happens up here when the energy is being released. The weak nuclear force is a little bit more enigmatic. It's more how elements are transmuting in ways that we don't completely understand. And the energy released is less. So scientists haven't really paid as much attention to what's going on in the low energy reaction. So what's happening here? LENR might not be nuclear. That's why I'm not sure it's right to call it a low energy nuclear reaction. It might be a high chemical reaction that we just don't quite understand. Or maybe it's somewhere, something in between. Nature doesn't care if you call it nuclear or chemical, all right? There's something going on. What's going on there, we're not entirely clear. Okay, so the simple way that I'm going to explain, and I'll just put this slide up here just as a graphic. Here's what we think is happening, and I'm using this is a kind of a general theory. This is based on Robert Godes's theory, which he calls quantum fusion. It's also has similarities to the theory that's being promoted by two scientists named Whittam and Larson, the Whittam-Larson theory. And this is a theory that NASA is following and that they believe is the reaction. A lot of people don't think that this is really what's happening, but at least it gives us kind of a general idea. So the basis is, take hydrogen, very energy dense. By the way, the simplest element in the known universe, a single proton and a single electron. Very, very simple. And we're using, in this case, simple hydrogen, protium, the basic isotope. They're also deuterium, which is a proton and a neutron, and then there's tritium, a proton and 3 neutrons. So these isotopes of hydrogen is where we believe the energy is being coaxed out of. In the beginning, palladium was the metal that was being used. Rossi has now kind of broken onto the world that we can actually use nickel, which is a lot more abundant on the Earth and a lot cheaper, therefore. And also, rather than using deuterium, we can use simple hydrogen to stimulate the reaction. So at the atomic level, the metal, the nickel in this case, forms a lattice structure. And in the lattice structure, the hydrogen is loaded into it, into the kind of the interstices of the lattice. And the loading is an important aspect of it. So how do you do that? Electrochemists know how to load hydrogen into the metal. Then the lattice is pushed out of equilibrium by using an electromagnetic shock wave or something similar. Different things have been used, but the lattice gets pushed out of equilibrium. When it gets pushed out of equilibrium, that single proton captures an electron, either its own electron, it captures an electron that's being put into the system by the electromagnetic pulse, and it creates a neutron, an ultra-cold neutron. Neutrons don't occur in nature. They have to be generated sort of in a nuclear reaction. The neutron then combines with other hydrogen atoms to create these isotopes of hydrogen, from deuterium, the tritium. Robert Godes believes also quadrium, which is a very unusual and unstable isotope of hydrogen. And once it hits that level, at each level, energy is being released. The energy has to be put into the system to deform the lattice, to create it, take it out of equilibrium. And as it goes back into equilibrium using forces and mediated by the weak nuclear force, energy is released. Little bits of energy along the way are released all the way down until ultimately transmutation occurs and we end up with helium. That's the basic idea. Something like that is happening. Things are getting jostled, and it's the movement from matter to energy. We're starting to unlock the mystery of that movement from matter to energy, because at each stage, the only reason energy gets released is because the result of the interaction, there's less matter in the resulting end product, and what's the remaining part of it gets released as energy. Oh, I want to do this one. This is one of my favorite slides. This is Jessica Rabbit seducing the Coulomb barrier. I got this from Ed Storms. Professor Edmund Storms is one of the premier scientists, and he says that here's the issue. The issue is the scientists got really seduced by the strong nuclear force and by banging things together and creating huge amounts of energy. In order to do that, you have to break through what's called the Coulomb barrier. Does everyone know what the Coulomb barrier is? Or the Coulomb barrier is like this electrostatic force that doesn't actually allow nuclei to combine. And in order to do it, you've got to accelerate them at huge amounts of energy, and that's what we're trying to do in hot fusion. What Ed says is, no, let's try seducing the Coulomb barrier. Let's find ways to work around it, to release small amounts of energy that are usable for human beings, that don't create bombs, but create usable amounts of heat and energy. I think that's brilliant. Okay, why? Let's see. I went back to this. I'm not sure why. I wanted to talk about why I think why conventional alternative energy is just not going to get the job done. And we look again down here at the energy density of solar is way down here. Now solar is improving in efficiency, and it's going to continue to improve, which is good. But we're at these really low levels, and there are problems with solar energy, obviously. One thing, it's intermittent, and this is the same with wind. It only happens when the wind's blowing or when the sun's shining. We don't have batteries that can hold the energy. The most dense are these lithium-ion batteries. This is, you know what? I don't know. I'll have to ask Matt to give you the answer of what that is exactly. I think it has to do with the photovoltaic cells that are being used. So as I said, these are going to improve in efficiency and energy density, but I don't think it's going to be enough. There's also about solar that you don't hear about very often. The photovoltaic cells are made with rare earth metals. The mining of them and the processing of the metals creates toxic wastes that we really don't know what to do with. So we really do need a breakthrough energy technology. And that's why I'm promoting it. That's why I'm looking for companies that are working in it, that are trying to move things into this area where we start getting higher energy density with less risks and less waste. Oh, that was my slide for why solar is difficult to get on the grid as well. And as I said, the grid is antiquated and in some ways can't take a lot of the energy. The nice thing about LENR, once it gets perfected, is it is a true distributed energy power source, which means rather than having that diesel generator that we have out there keeping our lights on, we would have a LENR device that's providing the electricity for us to use here, completely clean. None of the waste that's coming out of that. That's the hope. That's the promise of LENR. So, the three companies. Professor Rossi, looking very charismatic and charming in that photo. Berluen Energy and Defcalion Green Energy Technologies. I've talked a little bit about Rossi. I'm told by his group that are working with him that he is no longer in direct control of his company, that there is a group now that is kind of taking over the replication of his work. They are working now to make sure that they can stabilize the reaction, that they can get a sufficient amount of energy out of it. Rossi has always said he wants to demonstrate 1 megawatt. He doesn't want to light 5 light bulbs. He wants a megawatt, which is a huge amount of energy. I think it's for sort of commercial reasons, so that it puts out of people's mind that this is not real. If you can generate that much energy, then this is real. So his group is working on that now, independently of him, so that they can say, we took his secret sauce and we've been able to replicate his work. And my hope is to do a demonstration out at the Google facility or an Apple server farm or someplace where it will really get people's attention and they say, there's no, okay, this is real, finally, we understand. We thank you for all the work you've done. Let's go out and move this forward. Defcalion, I don't know quite as much about Defcalion. They apparently have worked with Rossi early on. They apparently reverse engineered some of his work, and they claim that they haven't stole it, although Rossi says that they stole his intellectual property. One of the things that I joke of as a lawyer is that we'll know when LENR is true when the first patent lawsuit gets filed. Watch it. Watch my words. It will probably happen. So Defcalion claims that they're going to go on to the Toronto Stock Exchange and sell stock to the public to help support what they're doing. They're supposedly we're going to do it this month. I haven't seen any announcement yet that that's happening. So they're all buying. These are three that I think are the leading ones. There are actually other companies out there, some that are under the radar, a little more under the radar. In fact, another Italian, Piantelli, who was the first to work with the nickel hydrogen systems, also has a company in Italy. You don't hear very much about it. He's filed patents around that, and it could be that there'll be someone else coming out of the side that we don't really have our attention on. I really do believe that there is plenty of room for a lot of different companies to do this. I think we're going to find that there are different ways to coax the reaction, different ways to seduce the Coulomb barrier, that a lot of different methods will be applied. And when the US Patent Office does wake up, which I'm sure that they will, then there will be a number of companies that will be able to secure for themselves some little area of monopoly or area of protection where they can move through commercialization and move it to the next level. Going back to Berlin, and since I touched on the issue of patents, and I promised in my introduction to this that I would talk a little bit about patents, I believe Berlin has the strongest potential patent position. Their patents were written by Dr. David Sloan, who is a partner at Kilpatrick Townsend, one of the preeminent patent law firms in the country. They wrote the patent in exchange for equity in his company, which is almost unheard of. Patent law firms do not take equity because they see so many inventions. They're just like, no, if we took equity, we'd never make any money. The fact that they did that, I think, is very significant. Their patent has been granted in China, for what that's worth. Some people claim that the Chinese don't honor patents. That's changing to some extent. So their patent has been granted in China. So at least we have one country internationally that has recognized it. In the U.S., there's the application. It hasn't been denied. It's just sitting there. And as we said earlier, as Ruby pointed out earlier, the Patent Office has not been granting patents directly in cold fusion, but that is starting to change. Certainly when we have a demonstration device, that will change quite readily. The U.S. Navy was just granted a patent recently, basically using LENR for transmutation of nuclear waste and generating energy and heat out of that reaction, and their patent was granted, and there have been other patents granted. So I'm not one who says that the Patent Office is just completely closing the door. I think we have to keep working at it. I think we have to be more professional about how the patents get filed and how they get issued, how they get run through. And I think eventually we'll find that there's room for these players as well as other players. Interestingly, I was speaking with Mike McCrube just recently, and he did an interview. And in his interview, he says, I have been working on trying to get the scientific community to accept the reality of cold fusion and LENR for basically my entire career, for 30 years. And he said, I'm now at the point where I think that we have to change our strategy. And I'm focusing my energy now on commercialization. I'm working with the companies that are trying to bring out a commercial prototype where we can put it up and we can say, damn it, this is working, okay? We're gonna keep getting, let's get the funding and the research and development that we need to move this on to the next level. And this slide is just, I'm just saying, I'm not the only one that believes in LENR. These are some high, I kind of took people that have high credentials. Brian Josephson, a Nobel Prize winner. Dennis Bushnell, I talked about. Peter Hagelstein at MIT, doing great work swimming upstream there at MIT. Ed Storms, who's retired now from Los Alamos National Lab. These are highly credible scientists who support the reality of cold fusion. And they're working to move this to the next level. So, in closing, I think we have to take this technology seriously. I think all of you here probably do already. We need more funding for research and development. We're getting virtually zero funding out of the public coffers, and I think that really needs to change. And I know that a lot of you out there are change agents. And so my appeal to you is to contact your congressman. Let them know that this is real. Cover it in the media. Get people to see it. If you're in a position to invest, look for some of the companies to help support to move this forward to the next level. It's vitally, vitally important that we do that. The more research we put into it, the closer we get to the reality of a true commercial device that we can all use. So I want to take a minute. Do I have a minute, Regina, for some questions? And a couple questions? Yeah, and then we can wrap up. Any questions out there?
We need to have this hot for the questions. Okay, here we go. Let me pass this back to people, okay? Start here.
I was under the impression that Brillo is going to start selling blueprints to different power generating utilities over the oncoming year. If they don't have a prototype, it's not possible, is it?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure where you heard that, but that's not true. There's no plan to sell blueprints or anything of that nature. It's really they've been talking to people about this go-to-market strategy that I mentioned, which is replacing generation assets. That currently is their plan and how they're going to do it, but there's no plan to reduce or put plans out or blueprints, anything of that nature. Okay.
Yes, sir. I'm late to the meeting. You may have covered this, but many amateurs like myself have been told about patents that you can build anybody's patent and use it yourself, and it's okay. But you cannot build something of somebody else's patent and sell it to your neighbor. Can you clarify that at all? Are you an expert in that area, I hope?
I think what you're asking is, can you take someone's patent and let's say the patent is sufficient that you could actually build something from it for your own purposes, for your own experimentation, right? As opposed to building it for commercial purposes that you might want to sell the device to other people. My understanding is the first scenario there where you build it for your own purpose to see if it works, you can do that without violating the patent. But the patent creates a commercial monopoly during the life of the patent. That's what it does. Maybe one more question, Regina. One or two more questions.
I was just wondering about Keshe Foundation.
The Keshe Foundation? I don't really know very much. I'd love to learn more about them. Yeah.
This isn't really more of a question, this is just pointing out something as well. In Germany, they just recently made a solar unit that has 49% efficiency. And they now have, you mentioned that it only works in direct sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
Germany now, they're the world's leading solar technology investors, and they now have a UV situation, so it doesn't require direct sunlight, it just picks up UV.
Mm-hmm.
And they've now rolled out a whole, I think it's like 100-kilometer section of the Autobahn has
Great.
solar along the whole thing now. And it's like the world's largest solar producing thing, and it has something like 50 megawatts or something. It's really efficient.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So they're doing really well on that side.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, as I said, solar is increasing in efficiency, and it's a great technology. I don't actually have anything negative to say. I just don't think it's quite enough. And the more sources we have, the better, really. So I think I'm going to wrap. Maybe one more, Regina. One more question, and we'll wrap up.
I just had a question on the funding aspect. What kind of funding or how much funding are you talking about in order to get this kind of product or something to commercial state?
Well, I mean, I'd love to see, to start, it would be nice to see the a ARPA-E project. ARPA is sort of modeled on the Defense Advanced Research product. It's for advanced energy, and I'd love to see just some early seed capital for there, which they usually do, $5 million early funding. The amounts of funding that are needed here, or the amounts that could be used, is in the multiple millions. The hot energy projects that are being developed now are getting extremely higher amounts of money from the public. For our taxpayers are going into the hot fusion projects that, even by their own estimates, are 25, 30 years away before they have anything useful to use. So very difficult.
I just have a quick question. What happens on the scene politically when you have the DOE and DARPA now seeking this technology? What happens to people like Andrea Rossi?
Well, I mean, I think what will happen is they'll start funding projects of their own that are doing it. That if Rossi or Berluen they'll either be working with the Department of Energy, which they may already be, we don't know for sure, or they, hopefully their patent positions will be strong enough to withstand attacks of anyone else. And ideally, also people like the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project that are doing the open source project, that will allow other scientists to learn about what things are going on and get it into the public domain that way through an open source project, which I didn't talk much about, but also could be very, very interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Big round of applause for David.
So I really do just want to finish by going back to what I talked about in the beginning of the talk. My vision of what the world can be like. And I look to all of you to educate me on what's possible, what's next. But I think for humanity, this kind of technology is extremely important. And so, I say, let's make all the decisions, let's have the right resolve so that we really truly can regenerate Earth as the paradise planet we'll be proud to leave our children. Thank you.
Okay, we're breaking for lunch. Coming back, we're going to be looking at the power released in water. And so I think you got about a 3-minute jump if you're in Group C to get up to the cafeteria. We'll see you after lunch, 1:30.
Hello.